Welcome to all the participants who join us for today's webinar. My name is Alessandra Salgado and I am from the IRENA Innovation and Technology Center. Hopefully most of you know who IRENA is, but if not, IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, is an intergovernmental organization with more than 161 member countries. The agency supports countries in their transition to a sustainable energy future and serves as the principal platform for international cooperation, a center of excellence, and a repository of knowledge on renewable energy. On today's webinar that you just joined, we will discuss the need of systemic approach for innovation that can significantly contribute to a higher integration of viable renewable energy into power systems. This webinar will showcase 4 tailor-made innovative solutions developed for the specific case of Sweden, which aims for 100% renewable power by 2040. I am very pleased to introduce our speakers today, Ms. Arina Anisie and Ms. Elena Ocenic, who are experts from IRENA's innovation team. Before I hand over the microphone to Arina and Elena, I have a few housekeeping items to all the participants that are joining us today. All of you are currently muted and you will remain so throughout the webinar. Today's webinar will be recorded and available together with the presentation slides on the IRENA's webinar website. So we will send you a link with all this information. The webinar will have a 10-minute segment at the end, so we're looking to keep this webinar short, but also provide 10 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions for our speakers, please feel free to send it through the question feature that you can find on the webinar panel. We will monitor the questions throughout the session, and due to time constraints, we apologize in advance if your question is not answered. Also, you will notice that in your webinar panel, we have uploaded the reports that will be presented during this webinar. This is under the handouts section. If you experience any technical difficulties, you may write us through the chat section and we will do our best to help you. So with any further ado, let me kick things off by welcoming Arina and Elena. Arina, I hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Alessandra, for the introduction. I will just start right away with a big picture, an overview of the global energy transformation. IRENA analysis suggest that annual energy-related CO2 emissions under current and planned policies are expected to remain flat. However, we must reduce them by 70% in order to be aligned with Paris Agreement goal and keep the temperature rise well below 2%. Electrification, renewable energy, and energy efficiency are measures that can provide over 90% of the reductions required by 2050. Out of this, notably, renewable power and electrification of heat and transport alone can reduce emission by 75%. At the core of this energy transition are wind and solar PV. This is mainly due to the tremendous reduction of cost in these technologies. Over the past 10 years, solar PV technology cost decreased by 77% and onshore wind by 30%. This makes them cost competitive with conventional generation technologies. Having these clean, competitive technologies, we need to introduce much more of these technologies in our current share mix, generation share mix. Currently, we have, in 2018, solar was only 2% of the generation mix globally and onshore wind 6%. And we need to increase their share to almost 60% altogether, 25% solar and 35% wind. However, this poses few challenges on the power system because wind and solar generation are variable renewable energy resources. And it's to integrate these variable resources, it's crucial to focus our efforts to have to make the system more flexible. Therefore, the innovation focus right now should be on increasing flexibility in the power system, as we have already cost competitive technologies. We see three main innovation trends that are pushing and transforming the power sector: electrification, decentralization, and digitalization. Electrification of end-use sectors is emerging as a solution to maintain value and avoid curtailment of variable renewable electricity, while also helping decarbonize other sectors with the cheap, cost-competitive, clean electricity of wind and solar. Decentralization, it's given by the increasing deployment of distributed energy resources that turns consumer into active participant, fostering the demand side management and increasing flexibility on the demand side. And digital technologies such as blockchain, artificial intelligence, and even Internet of Things enable faster response, better management of assets, collecting data, monitor and controls all these decentralized distributed energy resources that now emerge in the system. So we see a transformation happening in the current power system that has an impact and opportunities in providing more flexibility for integrating higher share of wind and solar power. From the traditional power system, where flexibility was mainly provided by the supply side through flexible conventional generation. Now we are transitioning to a power system where flexibility can be provided along the entire value chain, from supply side with more flexibility on the supply side, even to demand, distributed energy resources and demand response, demand side management can unlock high potential of flexibility on the demand side. Also, grids can provide more flexibility through regional markets, interconnection, and stronger interconnection. So we see that now flexibility is providing along the entire supply side to integrate higher share of renewables at all levels, also large scale and distributed energy resources like solar PVs, rooftops. So we in our studies that we call Innovation Landscape Report that we published last year, we looked at innovation that can integrate wind and solar in the electricity in power systems. So we look not only at enabling technologies, but also at business models, market design, and system operation innovation, because we think that only looking at the systemic approach, like at all this innovation in all these dimensions, can actually, we have real on the ground solution that can increase flexibility in the system. So we mapped 30 innovation in all these 4 dimensions that can form solution. To spend like 1 more minute on this slide, I want to go a little bit to this 30 innovation as just to make it easier for you to understand what are the innovation we looked at. In enabling technologies, we look at storage, small scale storage, behind the meter storage, electric vehicles, the hydrogen, renewable power to hydrogen or green hydrogen, and the renewable power to heat. Also, we look at digital technologies like Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and mini grids, super grids. On business models, we identify aggregators, peer-to-peer electricity trading, energy as a service as very important new business model that can increase and change consumer experience and increase demand side management. On market design, we looked at innovation on the wholesale market and on the retail market, both to increase flexibility in both parts of the market. And in system operation, we look at how the future role of distributed system operators evolve, what should change in the coordination to the transmission system operator in this large view of decentralization. And also we looked at advanced forecasting for renewables and virtual power lines, dynamic line running as important innovation in system operation to decrease congestion in the grids. For each of these 30 innovations, we are writing also an in-focus short document that we call brief, that goes into a little bit more depth on each of the innovation, presents the benefits for increasing flexibility in the system and the enablers, together with a lot of examples. We have published 21 of these innovation briefs. 9 are still to come in the next couple of months, and all of them are available and free of charge on our website. Please feel free to take a look if interested in any of these. Now, to focus a little bit more on what is systemic innovation and why this is important, we believe that innovations do not emerge in isolation. We need synergies between all these innovations to have on-the-ground solution. For example, enabling technologies create new opportunities to operate the system and to have a more flexible operation of the system. However, how to monetize this value created from this new operation? For this, we need innovation in market design, new regulation that can actually create a revenue stream and create new business cases, and therefore innovative business models that can further support the enabling technologies. Just to give you a short example on this and how this intermerge, let's look at decentralization and how all these distributed energy resources emerge at the end consumer. We need a change in system operation. For DSO has to take up new roles to manage and to coordinate differently with the TSO in order to harness all this potential that the distributed energy sources have, and to increase flexibility and increase the share of renewables in the system. However, for this we need new market design, new regulation, time of use tariffs that allow consumer to have the price signal. We need changes in the wholesale market in order to allow all these small renewable distributed energy resources to participate in the market, and also creates new business model in sense of aggregators. Aggregators are very important to bundle all these resources and bring this extra services and flexibility to the market. So this is one examples. We have analyzed in our report 11 such examples of solutions that come together from synergies between all this innovation in the 4 dimensions. We look in the solutions to increase flexibility on the supply side, on the grid side, on the demand side, and also on system-wide storage flexibility storage solution that can offer flexibility on the entire system. Now, with this innovation landscape report, we basically created a framework for policymakers to understand what is out there, how they are interlinked to each other. And of course, there is no universal solution. Each power sector needs a tailored solution and for their needs and challenges. And these solutions are just an example of solutions, and they have different advantages and disadvantages to be applied in each context of the power sector. Now my colleague Elena, which I will hand on the microphone, she will explain how we applied this framework on a specific case study of Sweden.
Okay, thank you very much, Arina. Based on the framework that Arina has explained right now, I would like to show you what we did over the past year. We conducted several online workshops, but also in-person workshops where we gathered international experience from various leading countries. And I would like to take 1 second to explain a little bit which countries we engaged with. On the one hand, we engaged with countries that have very ambitious policy targets, up to different timeframes, from 2020 up to mid-century, 2040, and even 2050. And when we speak about very ambitious policy targets, we mean specifically renewable power, and we mean above 80%. Arina explained very well our work that we have done over the past 3 years, the innovation landscape report and the 30 in-depth briefs, which compose together our I'm trying to move, let's see, yes, it works, which compose our systemic approach to innovation, based on which we have developed our case study for Sweden. I would like to take one more second here to go into detail to say why this is so important. We saw that in the energy transition, it will be led by the power sector. And today we already have experience. We know that there are countries that have achieved almost 100% renewable power in their system. And of course, hydro-based systems like Brazil, Norway, Paraguay are very well known, as well as geothermal-based cases like Iceland. But the key challenge right now is actually regarding the increase of variable renewable energy sources. But we do have evidence from international experience, both from Latin America, but also from Europe, where we have very high shares of variable renewables. And here I would like to quote Costa Rica and Uruguay. Arina, can you help me with the presentation? Yes. Okay, thank you. And I would like to quote the example from Costa Rica and Uruguay, because in Costa Rica in 2019, there were 99% renewable power generated, and out of that, 17% was wind, and solar was a fraction of that. And in Uruguay, we experienced 98% renewable power, out of which 33% was wind. So indeed, we see these examples more and more emerging around the globe. Now let's look closer at the specific case of Sweden, which we have looked at last year. What you can see here is the generation mix for power in Sweden. And we see that this is heavily dominated by hydropower and nuclear power, whereby wind represents 11%. However, the challenge in their very ambitious policy target, because this is a policy target which is assumed by various actors in the country, in order to achieve 100% renewable power generation, this means concretely that the share of wind will have to increase from 11% today to 39% in 2040. And this is achievable, we know from the various example, also from Europe. If we look, for example, at Denmark, which thanks to the interconnections with the neighboring countries and similar enabling factors as Sweden, has made it possible to achieve in 2019 58% wind. However, as we go forward, there are some key challenges, among others. There are challenges regarding market design and regulatory aspects in general, but also some system operation challenges. On the one hand, ensuring power system stability, given that the system will be faced with an annual average inertia that will decrease from 202 gigawatt seconds today to about 160 gigawatt seconds in the next 20 years. And another challenge that the system will be faced is balancing more generally demand and supply, also because the consumption will lie rather in the south, whereby the generation and the hydropower generation will be more spread out in the northern part of the country. At the same time, expanding the network throughout the country with given relatively long lead times for the construction of the distribution and transmission infrastructure will pose some difficulties as well. And of course, the TSO is working on this, and we estimate that 15 billion euros will be invested in the next couple of years in this aspect. So in this project, with the two mutually reinforcing work streams that I mentioned before, on the one hand, the study we looked in more depth and the various exchanges we had with stakeholders in the country, but also international experience, we have devised 4 tailor-made solutions for Sweden, which tackle various challenges across the value chain. And I would like to go now deeper into these solutions. Let's have a look at them. The first solution, which tackles the challenges situated at the supply side and at the transmission side of the value chain, referred to the provision of innovative ancillary services to the TSO, coming both from conventional renewables, meaning hydropower, but also variable renewable energy sources. And in this case, we mean solar and but particularly wind power. So here we have a combination of innovations in 3 different dimensions, both the enabling technologies, also the market design and system operation. So by combining batteries with Internet of Things, with artificial intelligence, but also improving the market design, for example, by increasing the time granularity in markets, reducing, for example, the products that are being offered on the market and traded, and changing those specifications, we can enable some of that flexibility. And in the report, we have provided, on the one hand, examples from Sweden, where the solution is being trialed, implemented, both from the private sector, but also from the international experience. So you can read in more detail how this can work. So for example, with better advanced weather forecasting, which is an innovation on the power system, on the system operation side, we can predict better these resources and integrate them better in the system. Now let's have a look at the second solution, which targets specifically the transmission side. Here we make use of one of the key advantages that countries like Sweden have compared to many other countries, and that is the availability of an energy-only regional power market. So here, again, if you'd like to learn more, you can go and check each of the briefs for each of the innovations. But here we combine innovations in market design that refer to regional markets, but also the increasing the time granularity in those markets, together with digital technologies such as Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and supergrids. And here the idea is to exchange the resources, complement on a wider geographical scope. What here is also important is the exchange and the division of responsibilities at various levels. Here what's also important to note is that today, in the intraday trading time frame in Europe, 21 countries trade with each other, and this can be done at maximum 1 hour before physical delivery. So this is a big advantage for countries like Sweden and other neighboring countries, both in the Nordics and in the wider European context. And again, here we have provided various examples. Now let's have a look at the third innovation, and here we are bundling in a system-friendly way the distributed energy resources, meaning the loads that are connected at the distribution level and that are controllable loads. It's quite a complex solution where we combine innovations in all 4 dimensions, as you can see. So we do have the aggregation of those resources, such as electric vehicles. We also have distributed generation, such as rooftop solar, but also heat pumps. The idea here is to balance supply and demand, and also manage, and this is quite important, also manage the congestion in the network by making use of the available resources at the network, at the distribution network level, to provide services to the system operator. And an integral part of this solution is the aggregators, because they will play an important role in bundling all these resources. But the integration, and here I would like you to have a look at the market integration of distributed energy resources, because the integration in the current market of these resources will be also key to enable all of this. Again, here we have examples provided from Sweden, where there are time of use tariffs. We see also projects where there's a coordination between the transmission and the distribution system operator in order to make this happen, and other international examples. Now let's have a look at the fourth solution. And we know by now from all other experiences around the world, from Latin America, but also from European examples that I quoted before, we know that in order to achieve these very ambitious policy targets, at a certain point when the system has integrated very high levels of renewables, what will happen is that some of those, the installed capacity will be bigger than the given demand at the given point in time. So sometimes it might make economic sense to curtail that surplus electricity, but at the same time, that will open the doors for other applications, and especially for the decarbonization of other end-use sectors, if we electrify those end-use sectors with renewables. So at these 4 solutions, we have combined what we call the power to X technologies, such as renewable power to heat, renewable power to hydrogen, enabled by artificial intelligence and big data, and various improvements in terms of market design. And here we looked at various applications. This is a quite complex solution, so we looked on the one hand decarbonizing the building sector, but also the iron and steel sector in Sweden, and also district heating. And we also provided examples, broadly speaking, in the transport sector, both from Europe and from Asia. And we looked at other examples and other applications in the industrial sector in Austria and in Uruguay. And before opening for questions, I would like to conclude my presentation by showing you how all these solutions fit into a wider concept. So on this graph, you can see the various options that are available for renewables in Sweden based on our assessment. And there's a color coding to help you navigate through this chart. The idea here is that the decision whether to consume or trade renewable power on the regional market, which is in place in Europe right now, will be based on price signals. And this is what you can see in purple. So if consumed, the renewable electricity can either contribute to direct electrification, and here we look more specifically into solution number 3, where we bundle all the distributed energy resources, and this can open the door for electricity smart electric vehicles, smart charging that can at the same time also provide services back to the grid. At the same time, we have another option, and that is indirect electrification, which can happen via the production of hydrogen through electrolyzers. And again, this can open the door to trade the stored power over a long period of time, but also provide services to the grid. And last but not least, I mentioned briefly storage, but at the same time, all of these new possibilities can be opened up. So we speak about storage, about hydrogen storing electricity over a longer period of time, but also EV smart charging that, again, at the end of the day, if done in a smart, holistic way, can become not a burden, but rather a solution as we move forward with the integration of these resources in our today's system. Bottom line, and one of the key insights from this work, is that technology alone is not enough, and the enabling frameworks must be adjusted to ensure a smooth energy transition. And with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention and to provide some further reading for your reference. We both have used this material to present the slides that we just showed. So I think we can open up for questions now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Arina and Elena, for walking us through these disruptive innovations and latest breakthroughs in the power system. Also, we can see valuable insights on the framework of the Innovation Landscape Report and how this was applied to the Swedish context, and all these innovations that are already being taken on board. A kind reminder to the participants, all the reports and the briefs that Arina and Elena just presented to you, you can download them for free in the IRENA website, and also in the handouts section on your webinar panel, you can also directly download the 2 main reports, the Innovation Landscape Report and also the one on the Swedish case. So let me just jump directly to the questions. We have already received several ones, and thank you all of you for this active participation. So Arina, there's this question that is basically on one of your first slides, and is what it means by electrification. How this is actually an innovative trend. So can you explain us a bit further on what is this meaning under electrification and how it is an innovation trend for the power system?
Yes, thank you very much, Ale. This is a very good question. So electrification of end-use sector, are we talking here? Emerges basically as one of the solutions to decarbonize these end-use sectors for the global energy transition. We have now in the power sector clean and low-cost electricity. So one way to use this clean and low-cost electricity in the other sectors is through electrification. For example, electrification of transport sector through electric vehicles is a solution to decarbonize the transport. Then electrification of the heating sector through heat pumps, electric boilers in district heating or home heating. It's also a solution to decarbonize the heating sector through renewable electricity. Also, we cluster under electrification the indirect electrification that can be also a solution through hydrogen. We produce green hydrogen from clean electricity, renewable electricity, that can be then used to decarbonize different segments of the transport sector or different industries, application in industries. So this is a trend that it's more and more emerging, and more countries are looking at this electrification option as a solution to decarbonize the end-use sectors. Now, we looked at electrification aspect in this particular context to how we can use this trend and this electrification solutions to increase flexibility on the power sector, so that we can integrate higher share of renewables, because this electrification creates basically new demand on the power systems. And if we manage it smartly, this demand can be an important source of flexibility. We can charge the electric vehicles in a smart way in order to provide flexibility as much as possible to the grid. We can use green hydrogen in a smart way when there is surplus electricity to provide hydrogen and to further use it in decarbonizing the end-use sector. So this electrification plays in two ways. One, to decarbonize end-use sectors, and another one, it's actually to decarbonize it smartly, to use this this demand in a smart way to provide flexibility, demand-side flexibility back to the power system in order to integrate higher share of renewables. This is the trend that we explored, the innovation trend we explored in this context.
Thank you, Arina. That's a good overview to understand better about electrification. This is a widely speaking topic at the moment. And we have various questions. I know that we are seeing to 30 minutes webinar, but let us extend for at least some 5 more minutes and pick some of these questions. Elena, I would like to just turn back to you, and I have 2 questions for you. One that we received in regards on if you can expand more on what is the role of green hydrogen at the moment. And then I just would like to pick another question from the participants that goes along this line on the topics, that is, I would like support from IRENA to carry out a similar study as you did for Sweden. So how should we proceed? And if you can give us more information on these 2 questions.
Yes, thank you very much for both questions. So I would like here now to actually show you something, because one of these, there were a couple of questions that we received ahead of the webinar. So we could anticipate, let's say we try to prepare so that we can be as helpful as possible. So on the hydrogen question, I wanted to show you what is in the report that we did for Sweden specifically. So I was saying that we try to highlight what are the most disruptive and the most innovative projects we see out there. And indeed, in the discussion of decarbonizing those sectors, those end-use applications that are very hard to decarbonize, there's a lot of effort being put in there. And hybrid is one of those projects. What you can see here is actually the classical blast furnace route in the iron and steel making process. However, and this is really something we see in Sweden, but also now also in Austria, there are ways to replace the let's say the standard conventional process with hydrogen. And why is this important? This is important because the steel industry accounts for circa 7% of the global CO2 emissions, but in Sweden this is even more important. It's about 10%. So we see that some pilot projects are being conducted by industrial players, but these are also funded and are happening in cooperation and also with the funding of government agencies. So another way to look at it is, and maybe let's have a look at the next slide that I prepared to reply to this question, is that hydrogen can have a role to play not only in these hard to decarbonize, so-called hard to decarbonize sectors like steel and iron making, but also in other sectors where one might not necessarily think immediately about. So also in the transport sector, we saw a lot of movements. We saw a lot of projects both in Europe and in Asia. And I wanted here with this chart to show you some of the roadmaps that we've seen in Asia. And if you look at China, Japan, and the Republic of Korea, it's quite impressive to see today already the number of fuel cell electric vehicles and the filling stations. And in certain cases, these numbers are quite high, but especially what's even more important is their roadmaps, their plans ahead. Now, what's important here also to say is that we need green hydrogen, not just hydrogen, right? And another insight from our report by looking at the pilots and highlighting those findings is that in Europe right now, we have several operational filling stations for fuel cell electric vehicles. So all this is to say that, that we are just at the beginning of this disruption. To reply to the second question, is that we have developed, by doing this project, for Sweden specifically, we have developed a methodology which is quite simple, but can be easily replicated in other cases. Now, we do this work outside our regular programmatic work, our 2-year work program, and we do this at the request of member countries. So, of course, we need additional resources for this. So you can easily reach out to us and explain us the endeavor who is asking this question, what type of support there is needed. But of course, we are here to help member countries support with advice, with tailor-made advice, and look into specific country context. And I hope this replies to the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. So I will pick, looking at the time, I will pick one more question. We do have a lot, and we will be pleased if also you can reach out to us after the webinar. We will be happy to provide you with more information. So then we have one more holistic question. I think Arina and Elena also, if you want to add to this one. How effective has been IRENA's systemic approach, comprising these 30 identified innovations? Or has IRENA developed any criteria to measure the effectiveness of this approach? So can you just expand a little on how effective has been this approach, and if how to measure it in regards to its effectiveness as I said?
Thank you. I will start with answering this question. This is a very good and relevant question, and it's important to understand how we picked these 30 innovations and what was our main criteria and how effective they are. There are many innovations happening. We hear every time at the news different innovations. So we received from our member states and the policymaker the requirement to bring some light on this innovation. What are really the ones that have an impact, what are relevant, and what are just buzzwords and not so relevant. So we start looking at these 4 dimensions and all the innovation. We focused for this specific study to highlight the innovations that can increase flexibility in the system. We didn't look at any other innovation that has another role, maybe also deploy more renewables in general, but we look specifically at the integration aspect of renewable and on the flexibility of the system. This is one aspect. We looked at innovations that are not in the research and development stage, that are more in the early commercialization, pilot projects that are trialed and are experimented in more than one region in the world and more than one countries. So innovations that are more impactful, not studied by one single entity. We created this 30 list of innovation that we also validated with a list of experts in our networks, both from public and private sector. Yes, I think it was validated by around 35 experts, so a large number of experts that we reached out, and we tried to validate this. And now, how effective are each of the innovations? we don't have an answer for this. We tried also to bring numbers on each of the innovation, what is actually the impact that it can bring. It's very different from power sector to power sector, from context to context. One innovation can have a huge impact because of all different pieces that are in the context, and in other contexts can have almost no impact. And there is no way to really measure an absolute value, but what we did with the briefs that we wrote from each of these 30 innovation is to look at very specific pilot project, case studies, countries that are implementing this innovation, and to see what is their impact that they see, how much renewables more they can integrate using this solution, how maybe decrease the cost of electricity due to more renewables, and different indicators that show that this solution has some proven effect and some proven results in some countries for integrating of renewables. So just to bring an overview, we look at innovations that increase flexibility. They have validated with many experts, so they are innovations that we think are relevant at this point at worldwide, at different parties, not by only in one single context, but their effectiveness, it highly depends on the context where it is implemented. And these 4 pillars are actually very important to have on the ground solution. As I explained, the synergies between these 4 pillars, innovation in these 4 pillars, it's key to have on the ground real solutions and real results in increasing flexibility.
Thank you, Arina. Yes, I think this is very much about considering the context, the current energy matrix, and this also brings us back to the report on Sweden and just like a real case on how to apply this framework. Maybe, Elena, as we are running short of time, but as a final question, can you let us know a little on how the innovations and the solutions were selected for the Swedish case?
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe to reply in just a few words on this. It's important to state that what we look at, it's not just R&D, right? We're looking at innovations that are already being trialed and that are ready to be scaled up. And what we see is that in many cases, and we can take any of the technologies as an example, what is really needed is those enabling frameworks, right? So we saw that, for example, if we talk about unlocking demand response, if we aggregate in solution number 3, for example, all those distributed energy resources, one of the key aspects there is really having time of use tariffs, or enabling or making space for new actors to enter the market. So in this way, when we looked at the map, we thought, okay, what is actually needed to make this happen, to scale this up? So this was the key underlying question that was always on top of our minds. And another aspect, when we looked at the international experience, was to see if there is the projects which we are seeing that are being trialed and implemented around the globe can be replicated in the Swedish case. And we have given an indication for all of the different examples. So I hope that this can reply quickly to your question. But of course, for all those who are interested, please go back to the report. Please have a look at it. And of course, if you have any questions, would like to go deeper, and there are still open questions, we are more than happy. I'm more than happy to reply to those. So please reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena and Arina. So I think unfortunately we have consumed the scheduled time. We had a wide spectrum of questions. I just send you in the chat to all the participants. If you would like to follow up on your questions, please feel free to write to us. There were questions on electromobility, ICT, voltage levels for integration, also policy and regulation in regards to Netherlands, wind in the Swedish context. So please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be happy to follow up. And to close today, let me thank you to the speakers, Arina and Elena. Thank you very much for your captivating presentations and all the insights. I just have a couple of final announcements for today. So to be able to reflect on the deliverable of our webinars and ways to improvement, we would like to ask you for your feedback. So we will invite you to complete a very short satisfactory survey which will appear at the end of the webinar. And it will be shared with you in the follow-up email. So thank you in advance if you can just take a few minutes and fill in this survey. Last but not least, we would like to also mention to you about our upcoming webinars. So to our next edition of this webinar series, it will be the one on global renewables outlook that will be on the state of renewables mainly. And it will take place in 2 weeks on Wednesday. So for you to pencil in the date is on the 1st of April 2020 at 10 a.m. CET time. You can already register in the IRENA website, and the link will be again shared with you in our follow-up email. Once again, I would like to thank you all for attending this webinar session, and we hope that you have collected some valuable insights. Have all a good day, and thank you very much. Goodbye.